Today's guest is Dr. Lotte Valentin. Dr. Lotte is a naturopathic medical doctor, author, evidential medium, and spiritual educator. She was an atheist before she experienced 2 out-of-body near-death experiences, and we're going to talk about that today. Dr. Lotte, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me.
All right, so my audience loves to hear about near-death experiences, and if you don't mind, can we start with your first one?
Absolutely. My first near-death experience happened after I gave birth to my 3rd child, and I started hemorrhaging. I hemorrhaged right after birth, and she was born in between 2 earthquakes of a 7.4 and a 7.2 earthquake. Wow. And my labor actually stopped for about half an hour. So who knows what actually caused all the problems in the end. But I hemorrhaged right after birth, and then I started hemorrhaging again 10 days after she was born, and I went to the ER. They said, everything looks fine. They sent me on my way, hemorrhaged again the next day. Called the hospital. They said, okay, you're going to see the doctor tomorrow. Went to see the doctor. He did a manual examination. They said, oh, everything looks fine. It's just a trickle of blood coming out. I went back home. I started hemorrhaging again. We went back to the ER. And again, they came in and they did a manual examination. And they said, oh, it's just a trickle of blood, coming out. Doesn't look too bad. And I was hemorrhaging, like the size of a baby's head, of a blood clot would come out. So there were, a lot of blood loss. And then they said, okay, we're going to keep you here for observation. So I'm in the ER. So I'm thinking, great, I'm safe now. And I start hemorrhaging again. And the door is closed. This is in 1992. And no bell to ring. I'm just lying there and I start bleeding again. I start hemorrhaging. And the whole table is just covered in blood. And I'm just thinking, I'm young, I'm in my early 30s, thinking, well, this is great. Finally, I'm hemorrhaging in the hospital instead of hemorrhaging somewhere else. So eventually this nurse comes and she opens the door. And her jaw just drops, when you see, I can still see that face. It's like, that sheer horror when they look at you. And I hear the call in the loudspeaker, blah, 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 OBGYN, stat to the ER. And the call goes out and echoes, through the hallways. And I'm just thinking, great, finally they're going to figure out something is wrong. And this elderly doctor came rushing in with this younger physician behind him, probably a resident physician. And again, they do a manual examination. So they're looking, just a trickle of blood's coming out. And then I try to sit up and I said, I don't feel too good. And this huge blood clot, comes out. And at that point, the doctor knew because he had seen how much blood I had lost on all the bloody papers. And they just pushed me down on the table and started tipping it backwards. So my head would keep going down and my feet going up. And on my left, I had this nurse that was trying to place an IV because back in 1992, they didn't place IVs. Now, if there's a chance the patient's going to go into shock or passing out, the first thing we would do is place an IV so we have access to the veins, right? So she's trying to place an IV, but I'm already, in shock. And on my right, I have a nurse quoting my blood pressure as it's dropping. And being on that table, it was like I was just free falling. Imagine jumping out of an airplane and just falling to the ground, or being in an elevator that just plummets through its shaft. And that's probably, my blood pressure dropping. I just felt like I was falling. But it's shortly after the nurse kind of yells out and she says, 50/15, hurry. And that's my blood pressure. Now, 60/20, you're not supporting a heartbeat anymore. So, and it's very shortly after that she yelled out the 50/15, which I heard would wake up for years afterwards, dreaming about the trauma of having that experience. And it was shortly after that I knew that I was dying, which is very different from thinking that you're going to die. Because a lot of us have been in situations where you sort of see your life flashing before your eyes. The accident is coming. You're in a car. Oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to die. But this wasn't like that. I've been in situations like that in my life when you think this is it. This was very different. I knew that I was dying, but I was a complete atheist. So what do I do lying on this table, being a complete atheist? You have absolutely nothing left now. I pray to God to save my life. So here I am on this table and I'm pleading with God. And I'm like, I have 3 children under the age of 6. My children were 6, 3.5, and a newborn. And I said, I have to live. You have to save my life. They need a mother. And I'm just pleading, to hold on. And the feeling is like you're hanging with your nails off a cliff, that at any second you're just going to slip and fall to your death. It's that kind of feeling. And it was shortly after that I just got sucked out of my body. So I'm sucked out and now I'm a couple of feet above my body. And you often hear stories of how people are in the ceiling and they're looking down at their body. I have no memory of looking down at my body, just being above my body, more like seeing the ceiling. But knowing when I was outside my body, the first thing that I thought was, wait a second, how can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? So that in itself just threw me for a loop, because I was an atheist. I didn't believe in anything. I did not believe in any religion. I did not believe in angels, nothing paranormal. It was all just baloney to me. And here I am outside my body. But being in that state on the other side, there was a feeling of unconditional love, though I didn't meet anybody in this first experience. But I also knew that there was no time on the other side, because I knew I had access to all information, past, present, and future, all at the same time. And that time really only exists in our physical plane, the way we perceive life. But also I knew that I belonged to the body down there and that I was somehow attached to it. And I've heard people talk about the silver cord and things like that. But there was a knowing that that's where this part of me that was outside, or the soul, or whatever you want to call it, that it belonged down there in that body. And shortly after that, I just got sucked back into my body. And the feeling of leaving and coming back in happens so fast that there is no way of really describing it, because one second you're inside your body and the next second you're not. And people have asked me, do you know from what part of your body, you left? Was it the crown? Was it the heart chakra? Was it this? Was it that? There is no way, because one second you're inside, the next second you're not. So because it happens so quickly, there's no way for me to tell how you get in and out, though other people might have had that experience of saying, how they left. But it was a part of my experience. And then I was just sucked back in, almost like Tim Allen in that movie Santa Claus, when he goes through the chimney. It's my best description, because it's like a giant vacuum hose that's just going and just sucking you back in. But it happened so quickly. And then I became really sick, and it was a nightmare. And about 9 months later, I started bruising, and I would go to the doctor. I had bruises that spanned my entire hip area. Something that would give you a bruise the size of a dime gave me a bruise that spanned my entire hip area, just purple, red. And I kept getting pneumonia, and I was just so sick. And it turns out, so they did a blood test, and they said, oh, you have no immune system. Do you have leukemia or AIDS? And I told them what had happened and all the bleeding and all of that. And I was on this healing journey, and we didn't have any medical insurance at the time. So I kept being told, you have to go to the emergency room. You're too sick for this. And I kept just throwing away my lab work and just taking the medication, and knowing that I was improving. I was getting better, even if it was, slow. And if I bent over to put my knee on the floor to tie my children's shoes, I would get a bruise covering my knee. Any kind of pressure on my body would create bruises. So what that is called is like a bone marrow suppression. You're not making enough red blood cells, white blood cells, or platelets. So there was a suppression of the whole immune system. And then, so I keep getting better slowly, but I'm having every day, it's like my soul wants to leave. And this happens several times a day. And I spend a lot of my time just holding on to my soul. It took me 6 months to get to the grocery store to just get a gallon of milk. And even years after, it took me about 6 years to start function normally, to be able to walk through a grocery store and get my groceries home in the same trip. Many times I would be in a grocery store, people would come up to me and say, "Are you going to pass out?" Because I would just be completely white. And I would have to sit down in the grocery store and put my head down between my legs because I had so little blood in my body. I was so deficient. And I had this constant struggle of staying in my body. And this was just, part of my normal life. And at night, often I would take my head off the pillow, pull my legs up, because I would just feel like here I go again. I'm going to leave. Well, 2 years after my first near-death experience, this is now my normal routine of just constantly struggling and staying within my body. It's late at night. My husband's already asleep. And I wake up and I'm feeling really faint and dizzy, which was just part of my life at this point. And I'm doing the same thing as I always do. I take my head off the pillow. I try to hold on to my soul. Don't leave, stay, right? And I just get sucked out of my body. And it's the same kind of feeling like I had the first time, where one split second you're inside your body, the next second you're outside. But this second experience, I always joke that the universe meant for me to have this experience the first time in the ER, but the doctors were too quick to save my life, so I didn't get to have the experience. So I had to have a second one, because it's this second experience that really transformed my life and activated my life path, because everything I do today relates back to this particular experience. But this time I get sucked out of my body, but I just tumble through space. There's no tunnel. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. It's just falling through darkness, almost like somebody dropped you off from the spaceship. You're just tumbling through space. That was the feeling. But then I arrived at this place that I call the mid station, because I call it the mid station because I grew up in Europe. And when you go skiing, like in Austria, like all the Europeans do, or Switzerland, you can go all the way to the top, or you can go to the mid station, which is halfway up the mountain, right? So it was that feeling that there were levels above me, that you could go higher, but there were levels below me. And I somehow ended up at this mid station, which I also call the bouncing station, as if when you get there, it's kind of like, okay, you came too far, we're going to send you back, because that was my experience. So I get to this mid station without my body, and it's just my soul. And when I arrive there, the first thing that I notice is that it has the most beautiful music you have ever heard. And this music, you can't really make it on the earth plane. And I'm very musical. I grew up playing the piano and voice lessons and all theater and all that kind of stuff. That was my childhood. But this music was very different. And it was the most beautiful music you have ever heard. And again, I'm really perplexed because I'm having this experience, but I'm outside my body. But what I see is this log cabin. So I open the door to this log cabin and I'm thinking the music must be coming from inside the cabin. So I look inside, but it's empty. There's nothing inside it. So I think it's really strange. I look to my left and I see another log cabin, literally the mirror image of the first one, but it's on my left. I look inside that cabin, but it's empty. But as I'm being perplexed about, where is this music coming from, there is this growing light behind me, a very, very bright light. Kind of the feeling of, if you think of like car, like auto shops where you buy a car and they have those big spotlights. It's that kind of a spotlight, as if you're standing in that spotlight, and it's just a very, very white light. So as I'm turning around and face this light, I become aware of angels in the light. And I don't see the angels per se, but I see the outline of the angels in this white light. And I know that the music comes from the angels. But I don't believe in angels, right? I had my first near death experience, but I have discounted the experience as that is something that happens in your brain from oxygen loss, and it's has to have a scientific explanation. So here I am again, having another experience of seeing angels, even though I don't believe in it. So as I'm standing in this light, there is also a knowing that this light is God's source or higher source. Everybody has different religions, and to me, it's just the source of the greater power. I don't care what you call that source. Everybody calls it something different. But it is a knowing that this white light is that source, and that we carry this light within us, but we come from the light. We carry it within us, but we also return to that light, when we die and we leave our physical world. So that is what we are truly connected to, but that light is just pure love. And so that light is who we are. We carry that light. We come from the light. We're part of the light. We carry that light within us. And as I'm in this light, immersed in this light, I become aware of two spirit guides, one to my right and one that like diagonally to the left in front of me. And the one on the right tells the other spirit guide telepathically is what we're communicating. And he says, what is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back. And I say, no, wait a second. How can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? Like, how does this work? Because I have spent, almost 2 years discounting my first experience. And here I am again, having another one. And then the spirit guide on my left says, if I told you, you won't remember, as if they can control, what we get to remember. But then he says, you will remember this. And then the best description I have is almost like, it's just like a movie theater that appears in front of you, because the image just appears and it's like I'm standing on the moon looking down on the earth. But around the earth, there is this like diamond shaped, what I call the glittery fishnet, because it was sort of sparkling. It was like a silver colored, fishnet around the earth. And that's because I grew up in Northern Europe and Scandinavia, laying fishnets in the ocean with my grandmother. And when she lifted out those fishnets in the early morning sun, the sun would shine on the water droplets on the fishnet, and it would like sparkle in the sunlight. So to me, looking at that, it looked like a fishnet. And I know now that we have the internet and we can search on these things, it's referred to as the grid. And so that is what I saw, the grid around the earth. And he said, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that, I got sent back. And so my whole life now, my spiritual teachings is all about that, because we are truly connected. And now we have, science starting to back these things up with physics. And that is just what transformed my whole life path and everything, that happened after that. So those are the two different types of experiences.
Well, thank you for sharing those with us. I appreciate that. I'm not exactly clear on your illness. I just want to, before I get into your experiences, I wanted to ask. So you had a bone marrow disease for a while. You were not producing enough blood, and then that's what caused your second NDE?
Yes. So after the first one, I kept getting sick and kept getting pneumonia. So at 6 months out, the whole family got pneumonia. We had no insurance because my husband's company, he was a regional manager, and the company got bought. And so he was doing, job hopping from job to job to get the salary back up, because he was the sole supporter for, his wife and his 3 kids now. And we went to the walk-in, and I had, pneumonia and ear infections, and they gave us, all antibiotics. And then everybody got well except for me. I kept getting worse. So after 8 days on antibiotics, I went back, and the doctor said, what's going on with you? You're way too sick. You have to go to the ER. And I said, I'm not going to the ER.
Mm-hmm.
I was still traumatized after my first NDE.
Right.
And they took my blood, and they came back in and they said, you have leukemia or AIDS. You have no immune system.
Right.
And then with all the bruising starting that spring, and eventually, I got back. They gave me more medication. They called me the next day from the walk-in clinic and said, how are you doing? Because if you're not better, you have to go to the ER, because otherwise you can die. Mm-hmm. And then again in May, I had that big bruise. I went to the doctor, and we lived in California, in Huntington Beach at the time. So the weather is great. Nobody gets pneumonia in May. And the doctor, he thought my husband was abusing me because the bruise was so big. And I had my 3 children with me because my husband was at work. And I said, look, I'm telling you the truth. This is what happened to me. And I'm getting better because I actually drove myself here. This is almost exactly a year after my first NDE. And I put the children in the car and got here. So that shows I'm getting better. I know I'm sick, but we're getting insurance July 1st, and it's May. If I do lab work now and it comes up showing that I obviously have a blood problem, and then we're not going to get insurance, I'll have a pre-existing condition. Yeah. So it was tough. And then I kept getting better. And then we got moved to the East Coast in October. Now we had insurance, and I was just well enough to make it onto that airplane. My husband kept saying, we should have gotten you a wheelchair. Just like walking to the gate was exhausting. And for 5 years or 6 years, it took me until 1998. My daughter was born 1992, for me to be able to walk through a store without sitting down and passing out. So it was just this, constant slow healing, but I never sought medical treatment for it. All the doctors, I kept hopping from doctor to doctor because I was afraid of going back, because they all wanted me to do lab work. Oh, you're too sick. You have, you have a blood disorder. And now having gone through medical school, I know that that's what I had. Either idiopathic thrombocytopenia, which is ITP, when you have a suppression of your platelets. So I know I had that because I had all those bruises, and I was bruising so easily for years. And then also getting sick all the time, having pneumonia, like 7 times in 5 years or something. It's that constant immune suppression. So I know I didn't have white blood cells either. So now we're talking about bone marrow suppression, where it suppresses, the way that you're making your blood cells. So it was a long journey, but I made it.
Yeah. I guess it just resolved on its own.
It resolved. It took a long time. It took me 6 years to start function normally, to be able to just go to the grocery store and not get bruises from just, slapping my hand against something. I became a very good squatter during these years, because if I put my knee on the floor, I get a bruise. It took me a good 12 years total, because I had a lot of electrical interference after this happened. So I could tell you some stories about what happened.
What I want to know first is, where did you go religiously, and where are you now? I mean, you were an atheist even through the second time. Did you become a spiritual person and believing in God? Did you become a Christian, or what happened to you?
Right. So I have a really hard time. I've looked at many different religions. Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? And it's come to the point where I don't fit into any category, because I feel that all the religions that we have on earth were, in a sense, created by the human population from being guided by spirit. And we have different religions in different parts of our world, depending on what the culture is that we live in and what works for that culture. And so they're steered by that. So I have a hard time saying that one religion is the right one versus somebody else's religion. So to me, it's just I became very spiritual. I understand that there is a greater source that is our divine guidance, our divine source of power. And depending on what your religious belief is, that's what you're going to call it. So if you're Christian, you're going to call it, it's God or Jesus. Now, I grew up in Sweden. So in Sweden, back in when I was born, everybody was a Lutheran automatically. And if you didn't want to be a Lutheran, you actually had to tell the church that I do not want to be a Lutheran, because if you're born there, you're a Lutheran. And I was confirmed going through confirmation, at age 14. I did not believe anything that they taught me. I thought it was just all baloney and this is just all stories. And just never, had any religious beliefs. So I would say that I did not become one religion, but I became spiritual, and I accept all religions for what they are and what they bring to those people that have faith in that religion, because it's helping them with their life and, getting through life here on earth. It's not easy to be here on earth. This is hard work compared to being, on the other side. But what we do here transfers to the other side because our life is eternal. And so the way I look at life, I always joke that I am, we all go through hard times. And when you go through hard times, and life is like a roller coaster, right? It's up and down constantly. Life is really smooth, and then here comes the next obstacle. But when you go through these obstacles, I always tell myself, I am not doing this over again in another life. I'm going to get this right this time. Because if you check out or you don't want to be in this life anymore, right? But you didn't finish it. And when you work through things, as hard as life seems at times, there is always, always tell people, there's always a sunny, dry road on the other side of this very muddy tunnel that you're going through right now. But nothing lasts forever. And these are just obstacles that we have to learn to overcome in this life journey that we're on. And the more you can resolve in this lifetime, the more things you've resolved and you don't have to do it again. I often talk about the sticky note analogy, and how when you were up in the spirit world planning your life, you wrote down all the obstacles you're going to have in this life, and you pack them all in your backpack. And then you incarnate and you don't remember anything about this. But each time you pull out this problem, you pull out the sticky note from your backpack, and you're like, okay, I got this problem. I can solve this. And then that's it. You did it. Your mind, you changed your perception of this problem. You encountered that same problem. You now know how to handle it, right? You pull out the next sticky note after a couple of months with another problem. And as you go through life, that backpack with all those sticky notes that you packed gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And so it's just a matter of, keep working, take a step aside when you're going through difficult times and just say, okay, this is just another sticky note, and I'm going to solve this sticky note problem so it doesn't come back. I'm going to throw it away after the end of this, resolving this problem.
When you were in that white light that I think you were calling love, do you feel like that light was also healing you?
It is because the light is just pure unconditional love. I did not experience like a healing per se, or to me, the light was just pure love. It's just that it's like you're part of it. It's this unconditional, pure love. But if you were sick, now I was sick, I did not have that experience of it feeling like it actually healed me. It was just this overwhelming, unconditional love that it's so overwhelming that you can't really, I don't even know what to compare it to, because the love is so submerging on all, like every cell in your body level. It's like you are love. It's like you're part of it. You can't even imagine what it's like. How could I, thinking of my life before, if somebody told me this, because I was such an atheist and scientific, I would be it's just dreams or just something that happened in their brain. But that experience is very transformative in itself, because it's just unconditional love and acceptance of who you are. It's that we are all loved. We all come from this. We are love. We've just forgotten because we're having this human experience.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you started affecting electrical stuff. What other changes happened to you due to this experience?
So there was a lot of electrical things. My watches all stopped. So I put my watch on. This is after about 3 months after my first NDE, and it stopped within a few days. And it was a pretty new watch. And it took me 9 months before I had the strength to walk from the car into like a Target, if you live on the West Coast, or Caldor on the East Coast, to get a new watch. I just had enough strength to walk in, buy a watch, get through. If there was no lines, I could get in and out of a store in 5 minutes. Otherwise, standing still would make me feel like I was going to pass out. I wore the watch for 5 days and it stopped. And I said, wow, this is so, incredible. Like, I got a new watch. It was so much work for me to do that little tiny shopping excursion. So I went back, I returned it, and I said, I don't know, it stopped, went to customer service. And they said, wow, it's unusual. We haven't gotten any other watches back. I got another one, wore it for 5 days, and it stopped. Returned it. And again, same story with customer service. They said, pick another one. And I picked a different brand because I thought, well, maybe they have a problem with quality control. Got another watch, same thing. After 5 days, it stopped. So I told my best friend, and she said, it's not the watch, it's you. And then it dawned on me that, oh my gosh, it's me. But again, I'm still struggling with thinking that it's just my brain. It's the, oxygen loss. My brain made this whole thing up. So I had a really hard time with all of that. Then the television would turn on. So it was right around my daughter's first birthday, and I walked by the television and it turns on. And I'm thinking, okay, it's my 7-year-old and my 4.5-year-old. They got the TV clicker and they're outside playing with the neighbor kids in the little courtyard. And the TV clicker is on the table. I go to 8 neighbors to ask them if they have the same TV, if they're watching TV, if they just turned on their TV, that it could possibly have, gone through my window and somehow turned my TV on. Nobody's home, or the 2 people that were home, they're like, no, we're not watching TV. So nobody turned it on. I went back in, walked by the television, it turned back on again. And that's when it spooked me, because I'm still dealing with thinking this is all made up. And now I'm turning on televisions. My watches are stopping. And I looked around and I said, maybe it's my grandmother. My grandmother was always joking. And I just didn't have an answer for it. I didn't know anything about near-death experiences or what happens to those people. This is 1992, 93. So to find things out, you had to go to the library. And I was too sick to go to the library. There was no internet that you could search on back then. And then I started becoming clairvoyant. And right after my first near-death experience, they kept me, of course, in the hospital overnight. And my sister-in-law had just passed away like a week earlier, 10 days earlier. And as I'm lying in this bed, all hooked up to, monitors, I sense my sister-in-law in the top left corner. As I'm lying in my bed, it was up in the left corner. And I can hear her, and she says, you're going to be okay. And I'm thinking, how can I hear you? Because I knew it was her. And, again, that threw me for a loop, because I just had my first NDE the evening before. But that it started like the next day. And of course, I'm thinking that I'm just making all this up. How could this be? But then more and more things started to happen. And it was about 1 year out, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew my uncle was in the room and that he had passed away, and he came to say goodbye. And I could, I was lying in bed, and I knew he was up in front of me. I could not yet see the spirit, but I could sense them, and I knew who it was. And I knew that my uncle had lung cancer, but I didn't know how sick he was, or that if he was expected to pass away soon. And because I think a part of it, they shielded me from it because my family is in Sweden and I was in the United States. And I expected my mom to call me the next day and say, hey, you know, your uncle, my brother passed away, but nobody called me. So I said, wow, this is so strange. You know, why is nobody calling me? 2 days went by, nobody called me. Finally, on the third day, my mom calls and she does a little small talk, you know, hey, how's things going? You know, just checking in. And I'm just sitting there waiting, like, when is she going to say something? And then finally she says, oh, I also wanted to tell you something sad happened. And I said, yes, my uncle passed away, your brother. And he was just silence on the other side. And my mom said, you know, how did you know? And I said, he was here. And it's interesting because, and then she said, oh, you're just like my mom, your grandmother, because she always knew when people died. And I never knew that, you know, that was a big thing. But so that's sort of how it started. So it started right away. And then as time progressed, it just became more and more. And I would start to see things. Once I woke up in the morning and I had 3 images, and I like to tell stories that are verifiable. So the first image I see is this black scratch on the side door of the van. We had a van at the time. And because the kids are, you know, 9, 12, and 14 or something. And I'm driving the kids to San Francisco every day because we're living in East Bay, San Francisco. And they're going to school in the city. And I see the first image is black scratch on the side that the kids get in and out of the car on the entire van door. The second image is I see 2 of my kids in the car, which is my middle child and my youngest. And I said, you're in the front seat and my daughter's in the back seat. And then the third image, I'm leaving a note on the windshield of a black sedan car. But I don't see any drivers. I don't see any police. I don't see any ambulance. And I can't figure out why I'm leaving a note. If we've been in an accident, why would I leave a note? So I tell my 2 kids, that I said, you know, this is what I saw. These were the 3 images. You guys are in the car. Where could this possibly be? Because we have to turn left to have oncoming traffic to hit our car. So we go through all the intersections because I'm driving them to the city every day. And as we come off the Bay Bridge, crossing the water over into San Francisco, we get off the exit, we come down to the light, and then we make a left turn onto this street. And that is the only street that has oncoming traffic. So it's the only time the right side of the car is going to be exposed. And all the other streets in San Francisco tends to be one way. So it's not common that we have 2-way traffic like it is in most cities nowadays. And so every time we get to this light, my kids' noses are pressed up against the window, you know, looking, Mom, the coast is clear, you know, and we go because we're thinking this is where it's going to happen. So we do this for about 10 days and nothing happens. And then we go to the bookstore in Walnut Creek. We live in the Walnut Creek area, which is East Bay, San Francisco. And we come out of the bookstore and there's a big truck offloading books, you know, for the bookstore. And it's really difficult to get out on this tiny little narrow street. And there's cars coming into the parking lot. And as I'm making a right turn onto the street, the right side of my car scrapes the black sedan car that is parked on the street. So as this happens, you know, I know exactly what that scratch is going to look like. So I stop my car, I get out of my car, I walk around and I see the scratch on the van door that looks exactly like I've described it to my kids. And I just lose it. So I'm just standing on the street and my head is tilted up to the sky and I'm just laughing full force because I'm just relieved that it's over, all this tension and stress for like 10 days. And of course, here I am leaving a note on the windshield of the parked black sedan car because there was no driver. It was parked, right? So these are things that would happen. So, I mean, I have many stories that I can tell you, but I don't know how much time we have.
No, that's a great story. Let me ask you this. So what made you decide to become a naturopathic medical doctor?
So, you know, all these things would happen, right? I would see things and hear things, and it was just ongoing. And as time went by, more and more things happened. And at 12 years, before I said it took me 12 years to really heal, that's because after 12 years, my watch ticked for 12 months before it stopped. And so I kind of declared myself healed that summer. And I said, this is it, summer, July 2004, I did it. My watch ticked for 12 months because it took about, for each month I added. So the first year it was after 1 year, the watch would tick for a month. After 2 years, 2 months. After 3 years, 3 months. And that was pretty much how it went for 12 years. So it took 12 years to make this tick. And in 2004, now I'm used to hearing things about relatives and, people getting sick or people dying. It was just this constant more and more clairvoyant and clairaudient skills that were being developed slowly over this period of time. And I was looking on the computer and I'm thinking, I should need to go back to work. And, my kids are, teenagers, and I've always been interested in medicine. My father was a physician himself. One of my brothers is a surgeon. My mom was a hospital floor administrator. So it was, I've always been around like healing or helping other people, healing other people. And I came across naturopathic medicine. And then I realized that it was a medical school. And I was like, it's a medical school. I can't go to medical school. I'll be, in my 50s when I enter medical school. And there's no guarantee I'm going to get in. There's no guarantee I'm going to even graduate if I do it. And all the prerequisite classes, I have to take general chemistry, organic chemistry, biophysics, math. I mean, it's just a lot to do. So I just kind of closed the computer and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not doing that. And I'm walking to the kitchen and I become aware of a spirit guide in my living room. And he says, no, you have to go to medical school and become a doctor. And I'm just kind of stunned. And he says, you have to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And then he says, you have to combine like East and West, which is kind of what naturopathic medicine is, but also now I'm also looking at it spiritually, like combining old and new, bringing those 2 things together and bring healing and messages to the people. And those were my messages. And literally within a week, I was enrolled in prereq classes because at this point, after 12 years of having all these verifiable experiences happen over and over again, and having that experience with that clear of a message, there was no way that I wasn't going to do it. It was just, you're guided. This is what you got to do next. And I said, what am I supposed to write about? Like, I don't even know what that would look like. I've never thought of myself as an author. And the spirit guide was just, don't worry, we're going to tell you when the time is right. We'll tell you right now, focus on becoming a doctor. I get to medical school. I do all the prerequisites. I apply to medical school. I get into medical school despite my age. And so here I am in med school and I'm looking at, hello, spirit guides, what am I supposed to do? Like, give me the next step. For 4 years straight, I went year round. It's a 5-year program, but I did it in 4, just, plowing through year round. And I keep asking, what's next? What am I supposed to do? Same answer for 4 years. Just graduate, just get your medical degree. And I thought, okay, this is it. You've lost your marbles. Like, who does this? You put everything on the line, you leave, this other job that I had then as a sales manager in the biotech industry. You left a nice high salary to go to medical school, and now you're not getting any guidance. And as soon as I graduated, here came the next wave. And I met someone who was a medium that I didn't know. I met at a conference and we were having dinner. So she doesn't know anything about me. And she says, I'm a medium and your mother is here. And I said, this will be good. There's no way she's going to be able to say anything that's even going to come remotely close to who I am, because my life is very different. I grew up in Europe and it's, she can't even guess. She doesn't know anything about me. Sure enough, she pinpoints all these different things. And she says, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College in England. And she says, do you know what that is? And I said, actually, I do. Because I had been to a conference at IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies. And Suzanne Giesemann was one of the speakers who a lot of people know. She came from, she was the Navy commander of the United States. And she said, I studied at Arthur Findlay College. And I'm at this conference during my 1 week break as a third year medical school student. And I hear my spirit guide say, you have to go there. And I'm arguing with the spirit guide saying, I can't go there. I haven't even graduated from medical school. What are you talking about? This is crazy. I can't do that. I got to graduate. I got to get a job. I got to do my residency, all this stuff. Sure enough, as soon as I got out, I had taken my boards. I didn't even have my results from my boards. I didn't even have my license yet. And I meet this woman who says, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College. And the message was so strong. And she kept just giving me more and more evidence that this is something I had to do. And so 6 months later, there I was in England. And the rest is history. And then I learned that not only can, when you communicate with spirit, you have this ability. I didn't know at the time. I knew it was a relative that came in, or I would know it's a spirit guide, but I didn't believe that you could pull in a spirit for somebody else. And that's, as soon as I got out of med school, there I was at Arthur Findlay College, and I realized that, yes, you can communicate via spirit for somebody else. And it took me a good 3 days at Arthur Findlay College because I kept thinking, oh, it was just luck. It was luck that I got her grandmother. It was luck that I got her father. It was luck that I got her sister. But then, after 3 days, I said, wow, it's not luck. This is something that's really true. And we can communicate with spirit. So that's my life has now transformed, understanding the importance of how much healing that can bring to other people, because you can get closure, for all different ways. If you miss somebody in the spirit world, or if you lost someone, you were on bad terms, and all that healing can take place because you can bring in the spirits and get communication from the other side to that person. So they can, relieve all that pressure and sadness and grief that they're holding in their heart, because then that is going to affect their physical health as well, because it's interconnected. So my life now is about joining the two and, bringing spirituality into healing the physical, because there's more than just healing the physical component. Sometimes we have a spiritual or emotional component that also needs to be healed in order to create the physical healing for someone.
I'm guessing that Arthur Findlay College teaches mediumship?
Yes. So Arthur Findlay College is a castle would be the best way to describe that, about an hour north of London. And it is a school for psychic development, a world-renowned school. So people come from all over the world to study there, because it's evidential mediumship, meaning anybody can say, oh, I have your grandmother with me. She says she loves you, right? How do you know that that's true? So it's evidential. So you have to bring in, say, I have your mother with me, and she tells me, sometimes, depending on the medium, every medium works differently. Many times when I work, I'll get the exact diagnosis, and I'll say, your mother suffered from breast cancer. I can see that she underwent chemotherapy. It started in her left breast, and things are very detailed. And so you are kind of saying, I know who your mother was, and this was her personality, and this was her life, and, things like that. Anybody can say, this person loves you. So that's why it's called evidential mediumship, because you're trying to bring some evidence to the person you're doing the reading for, to say, yes, I am communicating with this person, and this is who he was, or, he died when he was younger, or he died in a car accident, or he lived into old age and just, basically died from old age. Something that can help, verify the information.
Can you give us an example of a mediumship that you did for somebody that was otherworldly or just almost unbelievable and very impactful for you?
Oh, yes, there's been many. I think, the one that just comes to mind is the burden that somebody felt for knowing that her brother was always depressed. And so growing up, she was always watching out for her brother. And so her brother came through during the reading. I didn't know anything about her. And I said he took his own life. He committed suicide. And she said, yes, he did. And it was her brother. And I would see her brother kind of like on a pedestal, and how she was always looking up to her brother. So I knew he was older and she was younger, but she was always watching out for her brother. And she, the whole time growing up, she was kind of the person who watched out to make sure he wouldn't commit suicide, because he always had problems with depression. But he managed to commit suicide, but he was older. He was like in his 50s. But she still felt like she had failed on her shift. But having him come through and say to her that it wasn't her fault, that this was his life path, and this was what he was, it was nothing anybody could have done to prevent him from committing that suicide. And the relief for her, and all the crying, that she could never release that guilt feeling that she had carried for many, many years already, that she had failed on her watch, and it was her fault that he had passed away. So that was probably one of the most powerful readings. But gosh, there've been so many crazy ones. I had one client that his wife passed away of breast cancer. And yeah, they're also different. This one, she had passed away from breast cancer, and she was, very lovely young woman, passed away in her 40s. But he asked, what is, I felt like she showed me a sign last week. Can you ask me what sign she showed me? So I said, well, I can try. Meanwhile, you're thinking, oh my gosh, it could be anything, a fly on a coffee cup. It could be, pine cone in the driveway. So I asked him, I said, what sign did you show him? And she showed me a small white feather. So I said, she's showing me a small white feather. And he said, yes, I had a small white feather land on my shoulder last week, and I knew it was her. And so it's just, things like that are so life-changing, because that, that they're really there, because they're giving you exact information. I had a grandfather came through that I saw, and I said, your grandfather was in the military, and I see him in an Air Force base. And I said, he met your grandmother at the Air Force base, but the grandmother did not work on the Air Force base, and she was not in the military. She was bussed in for the dance at the Air Force base. She came on a bus, and that's how your grandfather met your grandmother. And the person was like, yes, that is exactly what happened. So that is, just amazing. And he showed me that this person is writing a book, and all the different things that was going on in this person's life. So it can be, sometimes it can be so detailed, the information that you get. I've had readings where, people tell me what they're doing. And I said, they say, what are they doing in the spirit world? And this was a young man in his 30s that passed away. And it was kind of like an accident that happened. And he kept showing me instruments, and because just kept saying, what is he doing? And I said, I don't know. He's showing me all these different instruments. And she just starts laughing. This is the mother of this child. And she said, he was a musician. So it's just that confirmation, and you don't know why you're seeing things sometimes, but it's just spot on for the person. It's spot on. Right. Yeah. And it could be anything, or it could be, and people communicate differently too. There are times when, you'll communicate with the spirit world, and the connection is very good, and you understand each other very easily, and the information comes through very easily, and it's easy for me to understand. And there are other times when you feel like you're just like pulling the information out. And I think one of the hardest readings I did was, I had a mother, and there were just two daughters that I was talking to. I was doing the session for, and I said, your mother died of ovarian cancer. And they said, yes, she did. So that was correct. And I said, your mother, she loves you very much and all this kind of stuff, but she's not a good communicator. And it's very, very hard for me to get the information. I felt like I was just like pulling one thing at a time. And they just started laughing and they go, we've had so many readings and every single person that has done a reading for us says the same thing. Mm-hmm. And they said, she wasn't a good communicator in her life. She had a very hard time expressing her feelings and even just expressing herself. So it's interesting, what comes through, but also the way that the spirit communicates. If it's easy if we communicate, it's almost like the frequencies, they match up. So it's easy to communicate. Sometimes it's harder to communicate. It just depends. It depends on how the spirit communicates and what your style of communication or mediumship is. So I'm saying I see mostly images when I communicate, and I hear if they show me how they died, I'll feel it. I'll feel pain in the organ itself. And so being a doctor, I know what that organ is. And so that's how I can many times say the exact cause of death. Mm-hmm. But I had another funny, really funny reading. One of my funniest. He was such a funny man. And I said, you sat by his bed when he passed away. And he said he just stepped out. He keeps saying, I just stepped out. And then he's showing me a punch card, like a punch clock. People punch cards, check in and out of work. And she just started laughing. And she said that he always did. That was always his work. He punched cards, clocked in and out. So that's why he said, I just stepped out. I just punched out. And he showed me the punch card. And she said, I sat by his bed for days. And every so often I would check my messages and emails. And then when I looked up, he was gone. I just looked on my phone for a few minutes and then he was gone. So she knew exactly that I just stepped out. I just punched out, and the whole punch card. And then of course, many other things, but it's just so amazing that is what I mean by very, bringing evidence, because you wouldn't see that if it wasn't relating to that person. So I'm saying, so it's very, very unique for each story that brings something special for the person who's getting the session, something that's meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you at on your task of writing 3 books? Have you completed all 3?
No. So I graduated from med school and then I wrote my first book. So my first book is Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul. And that book is to help other people transform their life, because it's never too late to make, changes in your plan and go after what you truly love. And it is a story about my life and all the crazy things that have happened, and, clairvoyant, how all this different clairvoyant experience happened for me and how that can help other people. So I have little messages after each chapter with a short exercise that literally is just you read it and then you remind yourself to incorporate that into your life. And so it sort of takes you on a journey through my life with my 2 near-death experiences and everything that happened around that, developing clairvoyance and going to med school and everything that comes from that. And it's really just to help other people. So that got published in November of 2019. So about a year and a half ago. And now I am working on, compiling information for my second book, which will be a deeper spiritual book. So I'm hoping that this book is going to help develop that spirituality and intuition for other people and teach people to listen to their own heart and, go after and figure out who they truly are and go after what they're passionate about, because that's what life is really about, is, pursuing the passion, things that come naturally to you.
So besides being an author, do you have any other projects that you're working on that you want us to know about?
Oh, I'm always working on things. So I have different, except for, working as a physician, which I do. I split my time between working as a physician and working spiritually with people. I also work as a medical intuitive, which makes sense because I see and hear things about my patients, but also, just tuning into somebody, on a medical level and seeing what's going on with them. which is also what they told me at Arthur Findlay. You're probably going to end up going in this direction because of that medical degree, and it makes sense that's what I'm doing. I also work a lot with ancestral healing because we are tied to our ancestors, whether we like it or not. Whether you have a good relationship or whether you've rejected your ancestors and you never talk to your family members, it doesn't matter. You're still entangled with that energy because you came from that, not only energetically, but also DNA wise. And we inherit trauma via DNA, which is now, they have a lot of research going on. And we already know a couple of genes. I know one of them is FKBP5 genes, where trauma is actually transferred over to the genetics. So if your grandfather had a trauma, it now can express in, the grandchildren, for example. So it doesn't matter if you reject your parents and grandparents or if you love them, because you're still entangled, not only via your DNA, but also via what I call the energetic grid of of energy and depending on what you believe, but the energetic cords and strands of, how we are connected. You can feel energy. You feel the love of another person. You feel if somebody's rejecting you. You go into a room with angry people, you know that the energy in that room is angry, right? We are human creatures that tune into these energetic levels. And so I work with ancestors. I'm trained in ancestral healing. So I work with that, but I also sometimes also work with that spiritually, because sometimes people don't remember, but sometimes if that person is diseased, sometimes that spirit comes in and helps us resolve that trauma that person is carrying. And then I also teach classes on and off. So if you just go to my website, divinespiritualessence.com or Dr. Lotte, DRLOTTE.com, they're linked together. So Dr. Lotte is, has my medical information on it. Divine Spiritual Essence has more of my spiritual information on it. But I also teach classes sometimes in mediumship, psychic development. I also teach kind of beginning ancestral healing, just to help people understand how to look at that problem. How do I know if I'm carrying a problem? Just kind of an overview of where do you even start with that? I also teach something called Awaken Your Divine Potential, which is to help people find that intuitive power within themselves and how to transform their life and sort of enter into the fifth dimension of living, of understanding that everything is connected and we're all one in the end. So just helping people, teaching them how to sit in the meditation. How do you connect with a spirit guide? What are spirit animals? Just kind of helping people, walk into that and start exploring that. So I do a lot of different classes and teachings. And then I also have my own podcast, Dr. Lotte Science with Soul, where I bring other healers and doctors to help people understand a lot of medical issues in our society are often misdiagnosed, for example. So I try to bring in people that talk about that are experts in that field to help other people learn about it so that they can go get the right treatment that they need. And other problems such as anxiety, which is very, very common that people have anxiety. So bringing other experts in to help other people create healing in their own life, combined with, other spiritual teachers and gurus, my own teachers from Arthur Findlay College, for example, because they're the experts in the field. They have, 30, 40 years of experience working with mediumship and teaching other people. So just bringing all different kinds of healing to other people to enable other people to create a path of healing in their own life.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that? And if so, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Just go to one of my websites, either drlotte.com or divinespiritualessence.com, and pick one of the emails and email me.
Okay, great. All right, before we finish up here, do you have one last positive message that you want to share with everybody?
Yes, I would say everything, never forget that number one, life is eternal. And when you're going through difficult times, remember that this is temporary. It doesn't last forever. And it is through this darkness that transformation and new life gets created, right? So you're just going through a transformation process, and everything will be okay in the end, right? So always remember that as we go through difficult times, but also that everything is connected. We're all one, and everything is divine, and so are you.
Thank you for those messages. And Dr. Lotte, thank you so much for joining me. I wish you the best and have a great evening.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
All right, take care. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.